a great introduction. So I will just kind of repeat a little bit what she said. I am Leigha Filla. I am technically a fourth generation beekeeper if you're going to look deep into it. So our beekeeping business was started by my great-grandfather many years ago, and then has kind of just followed our lineage from there. My parents' honey farm is out of Akron, Colorado in the Eastern Plains, so about 2 hours east of Denver on I-76, just a small farming community. And I wouldn't necessarily consider myself an expert. I feel like there's always so much to learn. And so I haven't been able to, unfortunately, be a beekeeper and participate in the field in that sense because I actually have a very severe allergy to bee stings. So I get to work on the more administrative side, do presentations and educationals like this, do a lot of behind the scenes laboring like painting hives and putting hives together and things like that, kind of just to help, bring things to fruition in the bee yard itself. So I will go ahead and get started. Give me just a minute, please, while I share my screen with you all. Okay, can you all see my screen okay? Good, okay, perfect. So the business of beekeeping, we thought we were very clever with that. So then this is our brand new logo actually. So this is our logo right here on the right. We just had that freshly designed. So you're probably some of the first 13 people to see that. So we're really excited to be getting more official and moving forward with the marketing of our own business. So let's just go over what we're going to talk about today. We will learn several things, and obviously there's a lot to learn about beekeeping. We could probably give, several days worth of educationals when talking about the beekeeping industry, but we'll just keep it kind of basic today. So we are going to talk about why the honeybee, and in terms of pollinators, when you're thinking about that, why you would pick the honeybee over, say birds or butterflies, etc. We're going to discuss the types of honeybees, different honeybee products, plants that attract bees and pollinators, commercial beekeeping and commercial pollination. There is a big difference between commercial beekeeping and hobbyist beekeeping. Both are very necessary for the success of our environment, but they are both very different in terms of their day-to-day practices. We are going to go over equipment that beekeepers use, and how do you purchase your bees should you want to become a hobbyist bee farmer or a commercial beekeeper. And then just go over a few fun facts about honeybees, and then we will open up the floor for questions at the end using the chat feature just to keep things a little bit more organized. So, what is beekeeping? So the technical, term of beekeeping is the practice or profession of keeping and caring for bees, also known as apiculture. And here is actually, you'll notice that anybody that you see in these photos is going to be members of our family, whether they be my cousins or my parents or my brothers. So my mom's right here in the suit holding the frame. That is Jessica Filla. She is co-owner of Filla Honey Farms. And so why would you pick the honeybee, over other bees such as bumblebees, sweat bees, carpenter bees, etc. So honeybees are the only bees that produce products that are consumable and usable for humans. And they also obviously have the production and storage of honey and the construction of beeswax, and they perform more than 80% of all of the pollination of the world's crops. So they're very, very important to our food sources, whether it be for vegetables or for flowers that are made into consumable products for us as humans. And there are 7 different types of honeybees, but there is over 16,000 known bee species that we know of now, so there's likely that there's a lot more. But the most common one that you're going to see in the United States is the European or the Western honeybee. So there is 2 different genetic strains of those. There is obviously the European honeybee, and then there's the Italian honeybee. So just like kind of with cattle, you want to mix up the genetics in your colonies just a little bit to kind of get the best of both worlds. There's also the African honeybee, which they produce honey very well. They're very hard workers, but they're very aggressive. So when you have aggressive bees, it becomes hard on the beekeeper sometimes to perform the very necessary work and things like that that we need to be doing. So it's nice to have the mix of the work ethic of the African honeybee mixed with the calmness of the European honeybee, and then it just kind of gives you the best of both worlds in terms of honey production and being able to properly care for your bees. So these are just the different types of honeybees. Up in the top right-hand corner is the red dwarf honeybee. They're very small. Obviously, all bees are small, but they're particularly small. They're about the size of a sweat bee. And so these are the ones that are not as common. Again, on the first, I'll go back to the first slide. This one right here on the right is the European or the Western honeybee. And that is going to be the honeybee that you were going to see the most should you happen to see one flying out and about while you're going about your day-to-day business. So who runs the world? Girls. All worker bees are female. So that's going to be really interesting. If you ever are stung by a bee, it's because you have been stung by a female bee. Male bees are referred to as drones, and their only purpose is to mate with the queen. That's all they do. They're just there to help, you know, keep reproducing and keep the numbers of the bees up in the hive. And then, but when it comes to wintertime, when they're short on resources and moving a little bit slow, the drones are kicked out of the hive and they freeze to death. So, you know, that's how it goes, I guess. When you're the worker, you get to be the boss and make the rules. And then who is the boss of the hive? So the queen bee is the boss of the hive. There's typically only one queen per colony. If the bees find themselves with two queens, it's likely that the worker bees decided that their queen was not doing a good enough job to support their hive, and they will raise their own queen bee. And then when she hatches, the new queen and the existing queen will fight, and whoever wins will be the queen, and the other one will die in their fight, and then whoever prevails will be the new queen. So she only uses her stinger to kill other queens. She's the only fertile female, and she's the largest bee in the hive. As you can tell, you can see how much longer she is compared to the worker bee to her right. There is a significant size difference there. And she has the longest lifespan. So she can live anywhere from 2 to 7 years. And as beekeepers, you like to see that, because if the queen dies in the hive and the hive has not worked to create another queen, the hive will die as well. They really do not function without their queen. So as beekeepers, we really like to see longevity of a queen, and that she's doing a good job laying good eggs, laying eggs that are going to turn into worker bees, not just drones, because sometimes when the queen gets older, she will lay just drone eggs, and that becomes detrimental to the hive because, as we talked about earlier, the drones do not do any type of pollinating or work like that. Again, they just stay at home in the hive and mate with the queen. And then she can lay thousands of eggs during her life cycle, which is very impressive for a small insect like that to be that reproductive in her short lifespan. So there's several different bee products, and there's several that I haven't put on here, but these are going to be the main ones that you're going to see in mainstream grocery stores or online and mainstream media, and that you probably hear about day to day. So we have honey, beeswax, propolis, royal jelly, pollen, and honeycomb. So what is propolis? So you can see with the yellow arrow that I have here, that is kind of a shortened term, or a mundane term for that would be bee glue. So the bees produce that to seal holes and imperfections in their hives and in their frames. It'll help regulate hive temperature, again, by sealing the holes and things like that, which doesn't allow air, whether it's hot or cold, to get into the hive. That's unnecessary. And what's very interesting is that we will scrape propolis off of our hives and our frames into 55-gallon drums, and then our wholesale buyer will purchase that as well. And a lot of times, if you're buying cereals or lotion or chapsticks or soaps, that's where your honey product is coming from. is from the propolis. So what they're doing is they're taking that propolis and they're smashing it down, and then a very dark colored liquid is going to come from there, and then it will be color corrected in the factory for whatever they're making, and then it'll be put into your products, and then they can slap a label on there that says made with honey, made with fresh wax, and things like that. So if you are looking to purchase products that have honey and beeswax in them, it's important to just kind of recognize and think about the origin of where that's coming from, and then kind of do your research a little bit, like, is it actual honey, or am I getting a propolis byproduct? So either way is fine, but if you're looking for a more true and genuine product with honey in it, it's important to do that kind of research. What is royal jelly? So royal jelly is a protein rich excretion from worker bees, and every larva is fed royal jelly for the first 3 days that they've been hatched. But actually, it's really the food of the queen. So after the first 3 days, the rest of the larvae do not receive royal jelly. But if the hive decides that they want to produce their own queen, they will make the larva a queen cell, and then they will feed that larva royal jelly until she hatches and then becomes mature, and then she will have her fight with the already existing queen. And you can eat it. People do eat it. It's good for heart health, swelling, skin health, and a good source of protein. We do not sell royal jelly as a beekeeping business ourselves. It's pretty hard to come across. I don't spend a lot of time working in the field because of my allergy, so I have never seen royal jelly in person, but it's pretty rare to find, and they don't produce it at a very large quantity at a time. So it's pretty rare, and it runs pretty expensive in the store should you decide to purchase something like that. And you can also eat bee pollen. People are very serious about that. A lot of athletes and runners or people with allergies will purchase bee pollen from their local areas to help with their allergies. So the idea is that if you slowly consume the pollen of the plants and weeds that flare up your allergies in your everyday environment, that you should be able to build up some type of resistance and a little bit of immunity to that, and then it won't be as drastic to you when allergy season comes around. So plants that attract bees. So for home pollination, if you're just wanting to plant a garden and have some bees come around, you can do crabapple tree flowers, sunflowers, daisies, lilac bushes, coneflowers, and cosmos. So just your basic everyday flowers. That a lot of those you can purchase at the greenhouse or purchase in seed packets at your local hardware store or Walmart if that is where you shop. And then for commercial pollination, you see a lot of beekeepers seeking out almond tree groves, canola, sweet clover, alfalfa, which is primarily the source of flower that our bees are on. When they're not in California, they are on alfalfa circles. Orange blossoms, apple trees, and sagebrush. It's important to note that whatever flower source your bees are on is going to determine the color and the taste of the honey that your bees are producing. So, for example, if you're on sweet clover, your bees are going to produce a very sweet, very light colored product. It's going to be very desirable to the eye and to the taste. And then if your bees are on sagebrush, you're going to have a much darker, coarser tasting honey, which there's nothing wrong with that either. It just, traditionally consumers want, the common, like Winnie the Pooh gold colored honey flowing out of the hive. So that's what attracts the customers, is their first impression based on look and color. And so here's a few flowers that you can plant at home if you want to attract bees to your home year after year. So we have cosmos, sunflowers, coneflowers in the right bottom corner, and then in the top corner we have daisies. And the thing about sunflowers and cosmos and all these plants on here is that they come back by themselves with little effort, and they don't require a lot of attention. So if you want to attract bees, but you're not a big gardener and you're not big on watering, that's okay. These guys will do the work for you, and you can still have some natural pollinators at your home. So we have commercial beekeeping and commercial pollination. So there is a big difference between hobbyist beekeeping and commercial beekeeping. And the biggest differences in those is their methods of pollination and the size of their business overall. So a hobbyist beekeeper is going to have very few hives, maybe 2 to 3, 15, 20, maybe even 100. But a commercial beekeeper is likely going to have over 1,000 hives. That is the goal, is to have anywhere from 1,000 to 1,200 hives at any given time, just to compensate for loss and also to be financially productive when you send your bees for pollination to the almond groves or orange orchards or the apple orchards, whatever source of pollination you choose as a commercial beekeeper. So commercial beekeeping, everything is on a large scale, over 1,000 hives. You're continuously expanding the number of your hives because you have to, like I said, compensate for potential loss and disease, or if you just want to grow your numbers overall. A lot of commercial beekeepers wholesale their products. So for example, Filla Honey Farms wholesales their honey, our honey, to the Sioux Bee Honey Association out of Sioux City, Iowa. So they buy our honey by the 55-gallon drums and 55-gallon barrels, and then they mix it with all of the honey from the other beekeepers across the United States that wholesale to them as well. And then they will put Sioux Bee honey on the shelf in the grocery stores, and major grocery stores like Target or Walmart, things like that. Our bees do not they do not winter in Colorado. So in November, they get loaded up on a semi and they are taken to California where they pollinate the almond groves, and then they come home anywhere between March and April. And record keeping is very, very important for large-scale commercial beekeepers. So for example, Filla Honey Farms right now has about 35 different bee locations, and it's very important that they keep accurate records of when they've seen the bees, when they fed them, when they've been checked, when they've been moved, to make sure that nobody gets overlooked. Because a lot of times bees do require supplemental feeding. So it's important that that is made known when the last time they received feed so they don't starve to death. So here's a few pictures of some of the things that we have to do as commercial beekeepers. There's constant hive maintenance, as you can see on the far left. That is my brother painting beehives. Those are actually deeps, which is where the queen will live. And that's how you count the number of hives that you have. So you'll see on the far right, there is a stack, there are several stacks of hives there. Those are called supers, and that is where the honey that the bees produce is stored, is in those supers. So you do not count the number of hives that you have based on your supers. You count the number of hives you have based on the number of deeps that you have, which means 1 deep equals 1 queen. And then each deep can be stacked with anywhere from 6 to 8 supers during honey production time. So really, when a beekeeper says, I have 1,200 hives, what they're saying is, I have 1,200 queens, 1,200 deeps, but I probably have 10,000 supers, 5,000 supers, somewhere around there. And then this middle picture is 55-gallon drums that are actually full of Filla honey. And so we load these up, and then a semi comes out and loads them up from the farm and then drives them to Sioux City, Iowa. So the picture on the left is all of them waiting to be loaded, and then the picture on the right is a full barrel of honey. So commercial pollination. So for commercial pollination, people, send their bees all over the country. For us specifically, we send our bees to California, Washington, and sometimes Oklahoma. And we do not decide where our bees are going. We actually have a bee broker, and he works with several almond grove owners and apple orchard owners in California and Washington. And then he makes the agreements with them, how many beehives do you need? How many do you think you're gonna need this year for production, etc. And then he tells us where we're gonna place our bees. So he communicates with the owners, we communicate with him, and that's how we figure out where our hives are going to be placed for the pollination time. Bee health and inspection is very, very serious. So when they enter the state of California, for example, every single hive, the lid will be popped open and inspected. And if you have one sick hive on your semi-load, you're going to get turned away and you're going to have to go home. It's kind of like a cruise ship. If, you know, everyone is in close proximity and somebody gets sick, the likeliness of many other people getting sick is very high. So it's the same with bees, because you are mixing hives from Montana and Colorado and Florida, Pennsylvania all together. And if they all start intermingling and get sick, then it can cause a lot of loss for us as beekeepers. So there's year-round preparation. When we're not extracting honey and when our bees are in California, we are building hives, painting hives, scraping hives, getting frames ready, just ensuring that our bees have the best possible home, because you want to make sure that their environment is clean and safe and healthy for them. That way they have the ability to perform at their highest level. So it's just kind of like people, if you're in a bad environment, you're probably not going to perform as well, but if you're well fed and well taken care of, you are going to perform well. And this is a picture of how our bees get to California. So that is a big question that we get asked a lot. A lot of people ask, oh, do they fly out there? No, they do not. So they are loaded up on big semis, typically in the middle of the night, because they won't be flying, and then when it's very cold. So they will stack these bees on top of each other, and then they are netted, and then we hire truckers to haul our bees out to California. And so you have to have special permits to haul bees. Insurance is pretty tricky when you're hauling bees. They're not very, if at all, easily insured. So that becomes a huge liability for the trucker and then also the beekeeper as well. So they are netted and they are driven almost, with minimal stops straight through to California, so they can be unloaded and get off the truck. The catch is that when your bees get to California, there's nobody there to unload them. So you have to be there with the truck, or someone in your bee business has to be there to unload the semi. They just take them out there for you. Nobody works them while you're out there. So they take them for you. But once they get there, you're responsible for unloading, you're responsible for medicating, placing, and feeding. So if you're a beekeeper that participates in pollination in California, it's likely that you spend a lot of time away from home and a lot of time away from your family for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. So this is just some of the maintenance that we have to do year round. So the picture on the left is deeps that have died either from pests or just various other issues that can happen while you're beekeeping, just various issues that you can face, like as you would with regular livestock. So what we will do is, this is the kind of work I was referencing when I say that we work year round. So we will take these deeps that are here and we will clean them and we will fix them, get the frames replaced, patch any holes, throw a new coat of paint on there, and make sure that they are clean and ready so they can be put back out into the field. Because what's very interesting is that a lot of these deeps are probably older than I am as well. So the better you take care of them, the longer they last, and that's what you want to have as a beekeeper, is longevity, so you're not replacing boxes every single year. So this isn't the prettiest side of beekeeping, but it's a very necessary side of it to ensure that your bees are as healthy as they can be year round. And then the picture on the right is that is Barney and Jessica Filla. They are co-owners of Filla Honey Farms, and what they are leaning on is a tote of corn syrup. And so that is what we supplemental feed our bees in the winter time and when they before they go to California, and then what they are fed when they come home right after they get back from California. They need a little bit of an energy boost and a food boost, so we will feed them corn syrup, which we buy from Pepsi out of Worland, Wyoming. We load it straight off of the rail car into these totes, and then we haul it back home. And here is a peek of what it looks like in these California orchards. So these photo credits go to my cousin, Christina Kolba. She has Colva Honeyworks, that's her business. So the picture on the far left is an orchard that the bees have actually been in. You can see it looks like it's right out of a movie. It's very beautiful. And the hives just go right there, right in the middle of nature, nothing special. They're just placed in between the trees. And the picture in the middle is Barney Filla. He is moving nooks or nucleus hives, which we will talk about in a few slides. And then the picture on the far right is hives in the orchard being fed and taken care of. So you can see where that yellow arrow is. It is pointing at a protein patty, which will just provide more food and more protein and strength for the bees because they're working very hard while they're in California. So it's easy for them to kind of get down on their nutrition, kind of like a person or another animal would, for example. You know, if you're working hard, you need more supplemented nutrition and things like that to keep yourself healthy. So what is an equipment that a beekeeper uses? Well, there is a lot, but we are just going to go over some of the basics right here. So obviously you're going to need your bee suit. If you look at that picture on the right, all of those bees flying around everywhere. It's very important that you have a suit on and that it is sealed in all places, because if there's a hole in your suit or a spot that a bee can get in, they will. You can ask all of us that have worked bees. We've had our fair share of stinging and bad reactions with that. So it is important that your suit is inspected before you put it on. And my Jessica, even, she will duct tape the bottom of her bee suit around her boots just to double ensure that she does not get bees into her suit. We have an extractor, which is the giant washing machine looking photo that you see on the slide. And so our extractor actually holds 120 frames, and it spins just like the spin cycle on your washing machine. And it flings the honey out along the sides of the extractor, and then the honey is drained out into a pump system and into a filling tank, which is where we will fill our 55-gallon drums for Sue Bee honey. Our hive tool, that is probably one of the most important tools for us as beekeepers. That is used to pop open lids, to repair frames, to scrape hives. It kind of resembles a putty knife, except it doesn't have a handle on it. So one end is flat and the other end can be used to crank things open and take out nails. So actually it's a really great household tool. That's just a small plug. Anybody that's a DIY kind of person and a fixer-upper, I recommend you have one, because there's many, many uses for that other than beekeeping related uses. And we have a smoker, a fume boards, an uncapper, a tank, hives, and then we talked about supers and deeps, the difference between those, a forklift, and then a flatbed truck or pickup. So I'll show you some of those items in the next slide. So as you can see, this far picture on the left, there actually is a snake hanging from that pallet. Not all of beekeeping is pretty, so sometimes these rattlesnakes get stuck under these pallets, and you have some exciting encounters there. So that's not always the greatest, but the forklift is very necessary because these deeps are very, very heavy, and in order to lift and load them, it's important to have the proper machinery and that you are safe. The middle picture is just a bee yard with our bees on some, looks like some sweet clover or some canola, and that's what we want to see. A lot of blooms, a lot of fresh yellow flowers. That means a very close food source for the bees. So we would consider that a healthy yard because they don't have to travel far for a food source or to collect pollen to make honey. And then the far right is, you can see the smoke from the smoker. And the smoker is very important. So when we pop the lids off of hives, the bees are obviously not, too impressed because we're in their space. And so they're gonna be swarming around. And so what the smoke does is you put a couple puffs into the hive, and then it kind of dazes them a little bit, and they move towards the bottom. And so we do that when we are pulling honey, for extracting. We don't want to take bees away from the hive. So we will put fume boards or the smoker on there to kind of get the bees to go down, and then we will pull the super off and load it onto the truck. And here are some more examples of the equipment we use. Here is the forklift being used in an orchard in California to move some nucleus or nook hives. The middle picture is a closer up of the deeps. That is where, again, that is where the queen lives. And you'll see that we have our name branded into there. That's just to kind of be able to easily identify your own hives once they're in the orchard. And then should theft occur, it's a little bit easier to identify your hives. And so our hives are all painted kind of this light forest green color. A lot of beekeepers don't necessarily paint all of their hives the same color. Some of them are really wild colors that they think that they attract bees because they look like flowers. There's a lot of varying opinions, and it's really up to the beekeeper's preference. But we have this green color because it doesn't get as hot. The sun isn't, it kind of absorbs, it reflects more of the color, and then they're easily camouflaged. So if they are in an orchard or in a bee yard with tall grasses and things like that, they're not as visible to the naked eye. And that, believe it or not, there are people that vandalize bee hives, just like knock them over with their pickup and things like that. So we want to keep them as hidden as possible so we can keep them safe. And then the picture on the far right is just a close-up photo of the supers. And again, that is where the bees will store honey, and that's what we pull off when we are going to extract honey for the end of the season. So how do you buy bees? This is a big question, and it really depends whether you're looking for a commercial beekeeping operation or a hobbyist beekeeping operation. So, for example, if you're a hobbyist beekeeper or you're thinking about being a hobbyist beekeeper, you can call Murdoch's, Baumgart's, any of your local farm and ranch stores and just, say, hey, I'd really like to order some Nook hives. Can you order some for me? Great. They will happily do that. They sell a lot of that basic hobbyist beekeeping equipment at your local farm and ranch store. And you can also purchase packaged bees, which is what that top picture is right there. And that just is a box of bees, and you just pop that tin can lid off at the top, and then you'll just put it inside. You'll shake it into a big hive, and then they will start to create their own colony there. And then the bottom photo is a nook. And so a nucleus hive is what that stands for, is just a smaller bee colony created from a larger bee colony that is centered around a queen. And obviously, as we talked before, the queen is the nucleus of a honeybee colony. So that's just where they get the term nucleus hive. And there's queen breeders. So that's something that's very interesting that a lot of people do not know about. So we order our queens from a variety of queen breeders. So if you come across a queen breeder, that's likely that's all that they do. They probably aren't running their own bees for honey production or pollination money. They are focused on the breeding of queens. So we buy our queens from a few different places. We buy them from Kona Queens out of Hawaii. We buy them from Jackie Park out of California. And also we buy, most recently, we've been buying our queens from Paradise Valley, California. So it really varies on price and things like that. And it's really up to the beekeeper's preferences, how and who they want to purchase their queen bees from. And on the next slide, I will show you how they arrive. It's pretty fascinating. They are delivered by UPS. And so the picture on the far left is a queen cage. So that is what the queen will arrive in. And she will have a sugar plug in the end of that cage, which is the middle photo. And then the far right photo is the box that the queens arrive in. So they are delivered by the UPS guy. So when we have queens coming, my dad will track down the UPS guy so he's not stuck driving the bees around all day. And it's important to get them in a cooler environment, and also give them water once they get home. So you'll find about 50 to 100 queens in a box like this, and they will be sent with worker bees that will feed and water them while they're on their trip from, whether it be Hawaii, Texas, California, Louisiana even. There's several queen bee breeders across the United States. So, and that sugar plug is what keeps the queen from coming out of that cage. So when you're gonna make a split, if you're gonna make a split, you take two pre-existing frames from a pre-existing deep and bee colony, and you'll put them in an empty deep, and you will put a new queen that you get from wherever your queen breeder is from. And then you will stick that cage in between two frames, and then the worker bees will smell the queen, and they will make it their job to eat that sugar plug, which will release the queen, and then she can start become acclimated to the hive, start laying eggs, and then eventually, if it goes well, you will have a full functioning bee colony. So beekeeping in the United States. So there were 6 million colonies in the United States in the 1940s. That has obviously decreased drastically. So we're looking at about 2.89 million colonies today. There's been a 70% decrease in total number of beekeeping operations since 1982. So that's a kind of a scary thought when you think about how we talked about how bees are responsible for 80% of the pollination of our crops across the United States and the world. 87.7% of colonies are commercial operations though, so that's also very interesting. So you're not going to find that many beekeepers that are just have hobby hives. A lot of these beekeeping operations are very large scale, 1,000 hives, 10,000 hives, things like that, and their goal is to raise healthy enough bee colonies that they can send their bees to pollinate almond groves, orange orchards, apple orchards, things like that. Colony collapse disorder has been one of the biggest things that the beekeeping industry has faced since 2006 is kind of when it started to surface the most. There's not really a clear concrete cause of why that happens, but any poor health sometimes, pesticide use, overspray, accidental spraying of bees, that happens more than you would think. Somebody's aerial spraying their cornfield and you have bees on a circle half a mile away and it's a windy day. Sometimes it's detrimental to your bees. So it's really important that you are careful and cognizant of that when you are thinking about placing your bees somewhere and when you're reaching an agreement with a landowner that you have your bees on, that just make sure that you're in communication with them. Hey, do you talk to the farmer next door? Will you let me know when he's going to spray? Do you know? Just kind of keeping those lines of communication open. And then 1/3 of the colonies in the United States have been lost each year due to colony collapse disorder since 2006. So that's a scary thought too, thinking about saving the bees and the low numbers that we're already facing. And the big importance here is to buy USA honey and USA honey products. So there is a whole market of international honey, and there's a lot of politics and business that go behind that. But the purest form of honey and the most true form of honey that you're going to find is going to be in the United States. It's a lot more expensive by the barrel than if you were going to purchase it from, say, Thailand or Venezuela, anywhere in South America. So the United States does buy a lot of honey from foreign countries. But if you are looking to, have true, genuine honey, I would try to just do your best to purchase USA honey. And then from there, I would even try to purchase from your local beekeeper, whoever that may be, because that's going to be the truest form of product with without color correction, without corn syrup, without water. It's going to be the most pure form of product. And especially if you're looking to help with your allergies, buying from your mom and pop beekeeper is probably the best idea. And we will just wrap up with some fun facts about bees. So they do dances to communicate like any other bug does. I don't know if you've watched the Bee Movie when they dance and land the plane. It's not quite that extravagant, but kind of along the same lines. And worker bees live anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks during the summer, and then they can live for 4 to 5 months during the winter. So when they're working really hard in the 100-degree weather every day, flying, miles and miles a day, they don't live as long, but then when they're moving kind of slow, just taking care of the queen and things like that, they last pretty long in the winter. And a colony can usually have anywhere from 20,000 to 60,000 worker bees, and then you can add the queen and then a few drones here and there. And worker bees, very interestingly, spend their first 20 days in the hive. So they will not leave until they've reached a 20-day maturity, kind of so they can become acquainted with the hive, what their jobs are, and things like that. And then once they reach that period, they will start flying and collecting pollen and assist in honey production. So various jobs of a worker bee. They do a lot, those girls. So they clean cells, feed larvae. They spend a lot of time feeding larvae. building wax comb, cooling the hive, and making honey. And some worker bees can actually lay eggs, but since they are not fertile, they will hatch as drones. So if they feel like there's not enough drones to keep up with the queen, then they will go ahead and do that, but they are primarily going to focus on, again, honey production and then the various other odd jobs that they have to do. So they put off a scent when they sting. So if you're stung in the field, it's very likely that you're going to get stung again because they can smell it, and it's like a danger. So if you are stung once, you can probably guarantee that you're going to get stung twice, which isn't fun. But just a heads up, if you ever find yourself in a bee yard getting stung, prepare yourself to get stung twice. And then every queen has her own scent. So people are like, well, how do the bees find their home if they're all together? They will recognize the scent of their queen and recognize the scent of their hive, and they will go back there. So that is how they kind of go back home every day after their workday is over. So that is all of the slide information that I have for you. I will stop sharing my screen in just a second. And then I will open the chat for questions if anybody has any, if you want me to elaborate on anything. My mom is on here too, Jessica Filla. She is the co-owner of Filla Honey Farm. So if there's anything that I cannot adequately answer, she is going to step in and take care of that for us. So if there are any questions, let's see. This is from Cheyenne Hope. She says, what is one misconception you wish consumers and the general public knew about bees, either biologically, production-wise, or on the products out there? Well, I would say, I would kind of go back to, in terms of product, I would talk about how everybody like just assumes that if it says 100% honey, that it is a honey product, or when you're buying something, if it says, oh, Honey Nut Cheerios, or your lotion has honey in it. I think the biggest misconception is that that is actual honey, when a lot of times it's not. And then big chain brands of honey like Great Value or Kroger honey really isn't necessarily true honey product. A lot of it is corn syrup, water, and color corrective chemicals. So I would just hope that people would understand that it's very important to really buy, like I said, from a small farmer's market or from your local grocery store, or just directly from the beekeeper itself. I also think there's a misconception around bees being used for such large-scale pollination. A lot of people view it as a danger to the environment because a vast majority of the country's bees are in one place at one time. But it's important to recognize that bees, as though they are the sole, a major pollinator of consumable crops, there are other pollinators such as, sweat bees, carpenter bees, birds, things like that. So I would just, to each their own. Sometimes there are beekeepers out there that don't believe in pollinating and things like that. But if you are looking to be financially successful as a beekeeper, a lot of that comes from pollination. So it's really hard to build a livelihood off of beekeeping from just selling in your local store. Retail is not always the answer for everyone. So the next question comes from Logan Henry. How much does one queen cost? So it really depends on your queen breeder, and my mom can probably speak to that a little bit better than I can. I think the queens that we're buying right now are about $25, but I think the ones from Kona Queen are about $75 to $100. So, Mom, is that correct? So we will go, how can you tell if the bees within a hive are sick, and what can you do to treat them? Oh, there she is. So if you can tell that the hive is sick by the number of bees that are in it. So if the hive is really light and there's really not a lot of worker bees buzzing around in there, it's pretty clear that the hive is ill. And so there's a few different medication techniques. So our bee company in particular medicates with powdered terramycin, and so they mix that in with powdered sugar. And bees do not like foreign objects in their hive. So they will just take a scoop of that terramycin and powdered sugar, and they will just, I mean, fling it into the hive, and the bees are upset and disturbed by that, and they will eat all of that as fast as they can, and that's going to help against mites, which is big, hive beetle, and then a lot of times we run into problems with wax moth, and they will, I mean, they will just take over and they will smoke out an entire colony just with infestation alone. Let's get that queen question answered specifically. Mom, I'm gonna call on you now about exactly, like approximately how much one queen costs when you are ordering.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. Yes, the $25 a queen is pretty accurate. You can go up to 75 to 100 depending on the supplier that you buy from. And it also depends on the number. So of course, the more queens that you buy, the less per queen that you're going to spend. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. Do we have some more questions? Anything that we can kind of, does that cost cover the shipping too? Does that $25 cover the cost of Queen's Mom, or the shipping cost of the Queen's Mom?
No, it doesn't, because they for personally pay come next day air.
Oh, okay, next day air, okay. And let's talk a little bit about, is there much of a difference in queen quality depending on, we have a question here, is there a difference in queen quality based on those prices, or is it just by queen breeder? I think she's frozen.
Okay, that's another good question. It just depends on the genetic strain that you're looking for. So sometimes I try to explain it when you compare cattle producers who may run different genetics in their herd. We run, and most beekeepers do also, run different genetic strains in colonies because you're going to get different strengths, such as some of them are more disease resistant, some of them multiply faster, some of them may be more aggressive, but they're better at bringing honey in. Some of them are more calm. So they each come with their own specific genetic quality. Although the price may vary, it depends on what you are looking for performance-wise in all the colonies that you have put together.
Thank you very much. She knows her stuff. She's very knowledgeable in that. We have a question from Cheyenne Hope, which is, I'm happy to answer this question publicly. The question is, but what are some animal welfare practices or concerns with beekeeping, either hobby or commercial? So we're going to speak a little bit about the pollination. Again, like I said, there is some negative and positive opinions on that. And so there are people who think it's not right that we pick the bees up from their environment and take them out to California to work and then bring them back to work again for us. And then there's also people who do not think that we should harvest the honey from the bees either. But the thing about bees is that they're workers, and that is something that they enjoy doing. And so having them in California, they're in warmer weather and much less harsh conditions, just speaking in terms of nature, than they would be trying to overwinter in Colorado, where it can be very cold, or like, you know, up in the Dakotas and in Montana, where it gets even colder at night. It's very hard on the hives for them to be able to survive something like that. And do you want to talk a little bit about that, Mom? Have you had a lot of questions about, you know, animal welfare and whether it's a positive or negative thing to be involved in pollination?
Sure, I would love to. I think that is a newer movement, but I am familiar with it. I know that when there are animal and dairy-free conventions that they have started disallowing animal product, which used to into all of the mistreatment of animals, if you would. But what people need to keep in mind is similar to what you were stating earlier about the colder climate. So yes, we do take our bees to California for pollination. However, you cannot perform maintenance on honeybees when the weather is cold. So, for example, let's take a pallet of 4 beehives. If we left that pallet of 4 beehives in Colorado over the entire winter, it is possible that they would survive. They cluster together and they huddle down and they pretty much go dormant. Although that's a natural process, it isn't a natural behavior for a bee to be dormant and clustered for several months at a time. Whereas if you would take that same pallet to California, the bees multiply, they obviously get to pollinate. If they are having trouble, you can open the hive because the temperatures are mild. You can service them, you can clean them, you can check on them, you can put a new queen in there if that's what seems to be the problem. If it looks like they're not getting enough feed, you could administer feed that way. But if you're in a colder climate, you cannot do any of those things because if you expose the bees to colder temperatures, they will die. So that's why I feel like although traveling is stressful on the bee, and yes, you are using them for business, you are allowing them to have their natural process longer than just forcing them to go dormant. Because one thing that people need to know is that if you are a large scale beekeeper and you live in a colder climate and you are not sending your bees to pollination, you are probably renting a potato shed from somebody who is not using it at the time, and then you are using science to climate control your bees into dormancy anyway. So why not give them fresh air and sunshine if you can afford the transport?
Very great, very insightful answer. Thank you very much. The next question is, I saw a headline about types of bees that like to groom each other and that helps with mites. Have you seen these around or tried them?
It sounds like a so the answer is no. It's like organic great, but it is reasonable for a hobbyist probably think that it's a little bit more costly because it's a mechanical practice and we treat for mites. So but that sounds great. I know they do a fine job of taking care of each other, but I can't speak to it. We don't have experience with that, but that's very interesting.
Yeah, I was gonna share that I had not heard about that yet, but wouldn't that be wonderful if that's a great idea. I'm gonna have to do some research and maybe we have learned something today as beekeepers and we will get grooming bees and then we don't have to medicate for that and worry about it anymore. That's a very, very interesting concept there. There is a question, how long do you keep genetic records to trace bees back to their heritage? Um, You're very funny. I don't, I don't think that we do that. Like we talked about earlier, like just like with cattle or pigs, or anytime you have a concentrated genetic line, it is good to kind of mix it up a little bit to get the best of both sides of the genetic pool. Kind of how I spoke to about with the European honeybee and the Italian honeybee and the African honeybee. They all have their own set of qualities that are very, very beneficial, but together they're much better than separately. So just kind of integrating that in there again. Maybe we'll keep better track of our bee lineage to find out, who the real queen bee is. I don't know. Maybe we have royal bees. That would be cool. Yeah, so no bee family trees.
I bet that the queen breeders do have those type of records though, because not to digress, but I have recently learned this about the laboratory for queen bees also, and there's always a search and a need, especially with the colony collapse disorder. No doubt there's a laboratory that's searching for a bee that is pesticide resistant to certain chemicals, but receptive to the ones that they need for their own colony management.
Yes, very good. Very good response there. Let's see. Is there competition between pollinators? For example, when planting a pollinator-friendly garden, is it ever a concern that other pollinators would push out honeybees or other pollinators? I will just speak from when I'm home and I see plants. It looks like there's all kinds on our flowers. I could not get, I tried to put the video in this slideshow and it failed me. But we have this bush in our yard that literally looks like it's alive because there's sweat bees, honeybees, butterflies, moths, you name it, they're all on the same plant. So being that they are so small and things like that, there's not really a sense of competition. And there's so many sources for them to get pollen from, whether it was on the big list or not. I mean, they can get pollen from just about anything that's growing outside. So I don't think that you should worry about there being competition pushing out bees, pushing out this. At this point, any wildflower garden or anything that you want to plant to help the bees and other pollinators, I think is great, especially as we push to save the bees right now. Have you personally experienced colony collapse disorder? Yes. Mom, do you want to speak to that a little bit? But your audio is a little bit choppy. So do you want to try without your video and then just have your voice? Sometimes. Oh, there we go. I see you.
Can you hear me better?
Yes, we can hear you better.
Is it better?
Yes, much better.
Okay, that's great. Okay. Sorry for that. I prefer this anyway. So we have experienced the colony collapse disorder. It usually happens in the fall. So you've maintained your bees all spring and all summer. You have had supers on there. They've gathered honey. Everything seems to be fine. The floral source is starting to dwindle down. So basically now you're just down to your hive body only. And for example, you're getting your colonies ready to go to California and you start opening the lids to maybe give them some supplemental protein sources and they're dead or gone. So my own opinion, I think a huge part of it is maintenance. I believe that working bees is a lot more labor intensive than a lot of people think, and I would imagine that it would be ideal if you could visit every colony 14 to 21 days, but I don't think that's realistic. in a commercial setting. I also attribute that to the health of the queen. So some larger scale mark their queens and rated equipment. I would compare that to a regular tractor driver to one that has GPS and auto steer. For example, you could track the life of your queen, and if you've had the same queen, for example, for 2 years, then you may want to consider replacing her. Even though she can live to 7 years, that doesn't mean that she's strong. So I do know some beekeepers, and one of their practices is, and this is not sound very friendly to others, but they will physically go in there and replace every queen every year. And in their minds, they have fresh queens and strong hives. And that is a costly practice, but that is a way to probably avoid the colony collapse disorder.
Great. Thank you very much for that. The next question is, how many supers, deeps / queens does your family own? So we actually just did a count on our deeps last week, and we are sitting at about 920 from what I understand, but we would like to be at 1,200, which allows for a 20% loss, but for us to still be at right around 1,000, because that is the number that my parents would like us to see to send to California for pollinating, because you are paid you are paid by the hive. You are paid by the hive while you're there. And so that is the number that they have determined that we need to support our livelihood and our business. So 920 right now. We're hoping that in a month we have all of our hives scraped. We've been working on that pretty diligently, and we're hoping to have 1,200 by then. So check back in a couple weeks. We might have a bigger number for you, which is what we hope. And the next question is, how long has your family been in this industry? So I know that my dad's great-grandfather started this, and I want to say, when was that, Mom? Like the 40s or the 50s, maybe it's the 60s. I don't have an exact date, but I know that it is a generational practice. Do you know, Mom?
Yes, it is the 1940s. It started out as a small 4-H project.
So see, that's perfect for your kids, Jesse. Starting off, and then and all these years later, they'll be like, oh yeah, I started with one hive and a hand crank extractor, and now it's 4 generations, 3, soon to be 4, hopefully. So, are there any, what other questions can I answer for anyone, or can we kind of talk about? Is there any open discussion that we want to look at? Anything?
Leigha, did you want to take a second and talk a little bit about, like, if anybody on the call right now is interested in getting some of your products, some of your family's products, you want to give them any information about where they can go for that?
Sure. So we actually don't participate in a lot of retail selling because we are just really focused on that wholesale commercial side. We do sell our honey in 2 places. We sell it in Akron Hardware in Akron, Colorado, and then we sell it at Odell's in Akron, Colorado as well. We don't like to have those smaller stores try to compete for sales amongst other smaller businesses. We kind of want to stay true to the community. But you can always go there or call us, and we will ship you honey. We have shipped a lot of honey to Puerto Rico, to our relatives, and to Florida, and all over the state. We will do that, but we do not currently have it in a lot of places, and we don't have anything online and things like that, just because we are primarily focused on that commercial side, and then the retail is very much just a small piece of the pie for Filla Honey Farms. So. Anything else? What does it cost to ship the hives to California, and then what is the return? So the freight bill, from what I understand, can be very, very pricey. I want to say, Mom, I think it's pretty expensive. Go ahead.
It's about $5,000 a load to California. Then you need to take your equipment out there, which sometimes is multiple drivers because you have to take all your stuff out there. And then you live in a hotel for however many weeks at a time that you're there. And we make about 6 trips to California. So between Thanksgiving, I like to say between Thanksgiving and Easter, we've traveled out there 6 times. So 400 bees on a load. So 400 hives on a load, $5,000 a load. Then your hotel, your travel, the basic expenses, airfare, food, supplies when you're out there. The return can be good if your hives pass inspection. So you can get $185 a hive if they all pass inspection, and that is what the price is. But like all other commodities, the price per hive fluctuates, and there's many different variables go into the deciding factor. It's going to be the grove owner who is going to be paying you. It's going to be the bee broker who is going to find the grove owner. So it is worth it. It's a living if you can get the numbers and have the means to make all the travel coordinations for people and your livestock. So if I was going to put a figure on it, I would say probably a school principal salary or college education salary. So maybe 50, 60, maybe 70, just depending on how you've done. So lots of labor for not a huge amount of money, but you are gaining family time and flexibility, and beautiful scenery out there to look at. So that has value too.
Thank you. And they usually return around March, April, depending if they are going to do an extra rotation to Washington or Oklahoma. So we just had a few bees that came home from Washington a couple weeks ago. So, but right around that March, April area, they will come home. So they can be placed in the field and fed again, and they can start producing honey. Do inspections check just for mites? The inspections are going to be checking for mites. They're going to be checking for wax moth because that's very contagious, and also I would say hive beetle, potentially wasps or any other pests that could kill the hive. It just depends, kind of how I was speaking to earlier. It's very important that none of your hives have any pests or sickness at all, because like a cruise ship, if one gets it, the likeliness of everybody else getting it is quite high. So, well, I don't see any more questions in the chat. Oh, how is the wax made? Oh, there is 4 wax glands on the belly of a worker bee, so of a female bee. After that, Mom, how's it made? Is it from propolis melted down, kind of?
It's from their glands. You were right. It's from their glands.
Yes. So they have, they make a lot of wax. Go ahead.
I was just saying you were right. It's from their wax glands.
Their wax glands. It's just amazing. I just am so amazed that these tiny creatures can produce so many products and do so much work. So that's why I just find myself still in awe about what they're capable of, because I am a full-size being, and I just can't even believe all of the things that they do. I'm very impressed. So aside from an increase in hives, are there any other exciting business goals for the Filla Farm's future? Yes. So we just received our new logo, which I'm very excited about. So I am looking to launch a Filla Honey Farms Instagram and Facebook page that will talk about bee facts, different bee products, different DIY things you can make at home that come from beeswax or honey, like face washes, lotions, things like that. I'm really big into essential oils right now, so I've already looked up some stuff with honey and essential oils. Candle making, just various things, because there's a lot of unknown about bees, and people, they want to learn about bees. How can I help save the bees? How can I plant flowers to attract pollinators? What can I do to help? And so that's our goal, is to create an educational platform that reaches more than one demographic and then more than one particular audience is our goal. So that is coming soon for us. And maybe eventually we'll get some merch, it's very small scale, and send out a couple of hats and t-shirts here and there. But that is what we are looking forward to. Yes, Grandpa Lou will want a hat. He is a hat guy. He will want one. So that's what we're looking forward to as well. It's just some expansion. On the business side, I think just continually growing the number of our hives that we have. Like we talked about, 1,200 is our goal right now. And then as we become more comfortable with that and things progress, just the ability to continue to grow our bee business and things like that. So I think that would be the big goals, unless my mom has some more goals to add to that, but I think that probably covers it for the most part.
Well, I think a goal of ours would just be to continue to replace and refresh what we have and spread the word and encourage other people to have bees. You don't have to be a commercial beekeeper. It's very interesting, and it's a lot of fun, and it's very important. And there's a lot of support out there for people who want to have a beehive. I know it sounds very scientific, but that's just because it's new.
Sure, absolutely. So, well, thank you all for spending an hour with us. That was really great. I have never done a bee educational over Zoom before, so this might become our new norm, but this was very, very interesting. It was a learning curve for me too, and thanks, Mom, a lot for helping out, and everybody that joined, and Miss Jessie Stewart for putting this together and helping. It was really great. I really enjoyed it. So
I really appreciate you and your family taking time to educate us. Honestly, there's so much that I didn't know at the start of this, and I took tons and tons of notes. So it was definitely interesting. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of stuff down the road that I come across that I'll learn from you as well. So I really look forward to continuing this relationship, I guess, that we just started. And I really encourage everybody that's on, if you guys have questions or interest in this, to continue to use the Filla family and to support them in any way that you can. I know that I personally will be looking forward to your guys' social media accounts and supporting and sharing in whatever ways I can. So I think it's incredibly unique to find people who are not only extremely busy like they talk about, but also take the time and the efforts to educate people. So I think in return, we can obviously give some of our support in return. So thank you very much for everyone for hopping on, and thank you to Leigha and Jessica for teaching us today. And I guess at this time, we can say our farewells if everybody's okay with that.
sounds good.
So
thank you, everyone that
all
joined.
right, thank you guys so much.
Guys.
Great job, Leigha.
Thank you.